of Maryland's UM Ventures. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everybody who is attending today, and welcome to this installment of our Startup Fundamentals Workshop series. We have live webinars about once a week, and we record and post these to our Startup UMD YouTube channel. And so you can go on to the YouTube channel and view. Sometimes the webinars are unique, and we've got entrepreneurs come in and share lessons that they've learned. Sometimes it's like this, where it's more of an information session, and we've got past iterations of this information saved online as well on YouTube. And again, appreciate everybody continuing to fill the chat with a little bit of your interest in your roles, and I'll try and make sure that I'm kind of tailoring this to you. Please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A. Again, the chat, I've kind of got your information, but if you have a question, put it into the Q&A section. I'll pause periodically and look at those, but we'll definitely take time at the end to go over all of those. This is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. Today, we're going to cover some of the entrepreneurship resources and suggested paths to follow, where to begin, how to proceed, and why. And I think the best place to start with doing that is to talk a little bit about UM Ventures, our organization. So in the past, entrepreneurship resources were mostly focused on STEM researchers, and there are a variety of resources that are available through the School of Engineering and the Business School. However, today, innovative ideas and startups are coming from all disciplines, and resources are tailored and available to innovators in either sciences or the humanities. Our mission here at UM Ventures is for innovators, either in the sciences or the humanities, who are passionate about their research and would like a low-risk opportunity to transform it into product or service to benefit the public. The technical term for what we do is commercialization, but sometimes commercialization, there might be a negative connotation among researchers. And so we prefer to talk about innovation and how to turn your research into real applicable work that's happening in the world through the commercialization process. And as I go through the resources today, I will be talking about some past examples that have come through our office and how they've taken advantage of some of these resources and what those resources mean to you. There is a broad innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem here at UMD. This slide highlights some of the different offices and resources that are available to folks. UM Ventures, you'll notice, is just one of those resources. And we have entrepreneurs in residence, site miners, we do IP protection, we provide business skills and funding opportunities. I noticed just going through the chat that many of you are graduate students, and that's great. There will be a lot of what I talk about is applicable to you. But I just want to also encourage you to get involved with the Dingman Center, as they have a specific student focus and have a lot of resources available just to students. Again, we serve graduate students and faculty, and specifically graduate students and faculty working on university-owned intellectual property, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you have University IP, Dingman Center will also serve you. If you do not have University IP, Dingman Center will serve you. And so I encourage looking into the Dingman Center and what they have available. The SBDC is available to all Maryland residents. That's a small business development center. Quantum Startup Foundry is for quantum-based startups. MTech is again housed in the School of Engineering, but each of these kind of cover different areas, and I'll try and talk about specifically what we cover, and then we'll be available at the end for questions if you find that you don't necessarily fit within the groups that we serve, if you have questions about some of these other groups. Through the various programs that we work with, there's over $1 million in funding opportunities. Today, I will talk most specifically about NSF I-Corps, the TEDCO Maryland Innovation Initiative, the Maryland Industrial Partnerships, and the others I will touch on briefly, but these are just some of the funding opportunities available. And again, each one has slightly different targeted audience. Some of them are more broad, some of them are more narrow, but there's lots of opportunities to get funding if you're working with University IP. But today we're going to, and let me grab this link to drop it in the chat. Sorry, I'll go forward a slide and then back a slide. I'm going to cover, there's a great flowchart at startupguide.umd.edu, and it kind of outlines the pathway that we see our startups taking through the resources that we offer. If you think of it as kind of a game board, you can start at the beginning and that'll get you to the end, but you can also jump in at any of the various points where you want to. The points in this pathway aren't prerequisites. It's not like you have to do one to do the other. However, we do find that they do fit kind of in a really good chronological order. And they cover these 4 stages of a startup. First, the feasibility assessment, determining if your idea is feasible and has a market and has potential to be a startup. 2, startup formation, so actually taking that from an idea into an actual startup. 3, which is startup acceleration. So going from I've registered as an LLC, I'm a company, to how do I get my first round of funding? How do I recruit people to my team? How do I find office space to work in? To being a sustainable company that's actually producing product and returning revenue. And again, we're going to walk through these 4 stages. Different startups may jump in at different points in time, but each of these is an important part to check off the list as you go through the process of going from idea to a startup. And it's highlighted in more detail again at that startupguide.umd.edu. So this is the typical path. Again, I've highlighted each of those stages kind of in different colors, with feasibility assessment here as these 2 boxes in blue, startup formation with the 2 boxes in yellow, startup acceleration here in red, and then the sustainable company here in green. But I do want to talk a little bit about intellectual property, and this will apply, again, reading through your purposes for being here in the chat. This will apply to some of you it won't apply to. But what is intellectual property? And intellectual property refers to the creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs, symbols, names, and images used in commerce. It is the primary mission of universities to advance, preserve, and disseminate knowledge, and intellectual property is often that knowledge. And so the University of Maryland has intellectual property policy that assures that the benefits of university research and scholarship are fairly disseminated to benefit the public. We are a public institution, and that is a huge part of our mission, is to disseminate the knowledge developed here on campus to the public. 2, to create an environment that encourages and recognizes creative efforts of faculty, students, and personnel. We want to recognize the contributions of individuals and teams to creating this knowledge. And then 3, generate resources to support the university's primary mission. Intellectual property law, as established in the United States and around the world, allows for compensation for individuals and institutions that come up with these various ideas, this property that are creations of the mind. And so our office, in particular, works with research and things that are developed here on the university. And so if you are a PhD student, as I see that some of you are, and you're working on research, and you're like, hey, I think there's a broader application for this, or I think there's a market for this. You, as a researcher on that, own part of that idea. However, the rest of your team also owns part of that idea. And the university, which is funded, housed, paid salaries for people working on that team, also own part of the idea. And so the first step in this entire process, if you have university IP, is to disclose that to an innovation manager who works in our office, and to talk about what it is that you're researching, what it is that you've discovered. And they'll go through the process of figuring out, hey, how do we protect and just how do we establish this intellectual property? And there's a variety of different ways that we do that. We do that through patents, we do that through trademarks, service marks, copyrights. Again, it all depends on what exactly it is that you have been working on and researching and discovered, and how it needs to be protected going forward. And these can be, again, a lot of times when we work with researchers, right, there's this desire to share their information as widely as possible, because that's what they're trying to do. But intellectual property is an important part of actually sharing that information. If you think of something like Wikipedia, which is this huge open source encyclopedia of knowledge, there still is intellectual property protected within Wikipedia. There still is a common Creative Commons license that is being applied that explains how that knowledge can be used, how it can be quoted, how it can't be used, to protect the integrity of that knowledge, that people know the source that it's coming from. And so again, anything that you discover, you would want to disclose, so that way we can identify the best way to protect the integrity of that, and protect, again, the individuals who have worked on it and the knowledge itself. A caveat to this: if you are a student, so not a postdoc, but an undergraduate student doesn't have a salary coming from the university. And therefore, if there is something that you have invented, not as part of a lab or a business idea that you have come up with, that is not considered university IP. That is considered your own IP. And you can come to our office to identify, to work with our experts and figure out, hey, what are some of the ways that you can protect your IP? But we can't go through the process of protecting that for you unless you choose to turn over that IP to the university. And that's something that you can do. You can say, hey, I want your help in patenting this, or figuring out the copyright procedures, or figuring out how to work with companies. But you would share some of that IP with the university as part of that process. If you're a graduate student or a faculty member and your research or your business idea has come through work you've done with the university, then you do need to disclose it and work with our office to figure out, because the university does have a stake in protecting that. So the first step is you submit a disclosure to UM Ventures. You can go to this quick link here, go.umd.edu/disclose-IP. Together with an innovation manager, you would develop an IP protection plan. If necessary, you would do IP filings to protect that intellectual property. And then you would option or license that IP as needed to an existing company, to a startup, to wherever the market is for actually producing this intellectual property. Our first example of a researcher who's come through and done this program is Dr. Jim Fay. Dr. Jim Fay was working with an NSF grant and collaborating with researchers from other institutions, and developed the Connected Mathematics Core Plus Mathematics curriculum. So it was a bunch of research that went into how better to teach mathematics. And if it had stopped there, they would have published their paper. It would have been read by a small group of people, who then would have the decision of whether to act on that paper that they had read and apply that to teaching in their schools or their classrooms. But because they had developed something, Dr. Fay approached our office, disclosed this idea, and we helped him to copyright the material and then license that copyright to publishing companies who are like, hey, this is really valuable. This is a better way to teach math. We want to put this into textbooks and help teachers and students do that. And so they license the material, and then we're able to go and sell those textbooks to different schools. And the revenue is generated by the curriculum. So generally what happens is the revenue comes in and it's split between the researchers and the university. But Dr. Fay actually donated all of his revenue back to the university. And so that revenue has been used to fund more than a dozen PhD and postdoc positions within the College of Education. And so I think this is just like a really great example of how, the research that Dr. Fay was doing through this commercialization process was able to be disseminated to a wider audience, was able to be shared and used by hundreds and thousands of students across the United States. And then how the revenues generated from that came back and helped support the university and the mission in creating more knowledge and creating more of that to go out to be shared with the world. So again, step one, if you are working on university IP, is to disclose and come up with an IP protection plan. Again, if you are an undergraduate student or working on something not related to university labs, university research, university equipment, you do not have to do that step, but the resources still exist here for you. Step two is the feasibility assessment. So to determine, hey, is there a market for this research? Is there some sort of financial or social return or reward for figuring out for how to protect this and spreading it to kind of a broader audience. And the two things that we work with to do feasibility assessment are I-Corps and a tech validation grant from the Maryland Innovation Institute. So I-Corps is an NSF funded program that takes place all over the country. UMD is actually the hub of the Mid-Atlantic region of I-Corps. And it's focused, again, on this idea that there's tons of research going on at universities, but there's often a disconnect between doing the research and figuring out who the customers are for the products that are developed by that research. And so it's focused on customer discovery. It's got a regional program and a national program. The regional program is a 3-week program. It's virtual. You can actually go on to icore.umd.edu and read up on the program itself and even apply for the program right now. And they've got a couple hours of pre-work on a Canva page that you do to learn about how to create a business model canvas, to learn about what exactly different segments of a market is, to learn about how to do initial market research. But then once you actually join the program, there are these 3-week cohorts. And if you're doing a live cohort, it's every Friday for 3 hours. There's also a rolling cohort that's every other Wednesday, I believe, for 90 minutes. But what they do is they, with your team, identify what your research is on, identify what the market for that research is, and help you figure out how to go and talk to people within that market about what they do. The point of the iCore program is to listen and not so much to talk. A lot of times when you've discovered something, you want to tell everybody about how amazing it is because it is amazing. But the point of this program is instead to go to the types of people who might use your research and figure out what are they doing already in the absence of the thing that you have invented. How are they currently solving the problem? Where is the actual need for your product? Who in this giant company that's working in the field that you're researching is actually buying what your invention is, or is trying to figure out a solution to what your invention is? And so you perform 20 different customer interviews with who you have identified as the end customers. And like 5 of those interviews maybe just be like identifying, oh, who's the next person that we actually need to talk to? First we're going to talk with somebody from the company, then they're going to point us to somebody who's in the research division, who's going to point us to the buyer who's actually sourcing these products. And you're going to figure out, what are they doing? What is the need? How much money do they spend on it every year? Is your invention actually serving this field or not? And a lot of times what we find is that researchers come to this program with a lot of assumptions because they've been working in their fields about what their product does. And they realize that some of those assumptions are correct and some of those assumptions are just completely wrong, right? That's what you learn about hypothesis. Sometimes your hypothesis is correct. Sometimes you prove your hypothesis wrong. And they're able to better identify what the exact market is where their product would be used and needed, and how to go about working with that market. So the regional program, like I said, is 3 weeks. There's no funding attached. It's a fantastic program. The scaffolding is really great. I know some of you, I said, do interviews with customers and you've just been filled with dread. Don't worry. It's like, again, this is one of the best programs I've participated in. They do such a good job of helping you understand what you need to do and guiding you through the process. They connect you with mentors. And they really help you kind of put together almost the business side of it, if that's not something that you necessarily bring to it. Once you've done the regional program, you can apply for the national program, which is a 7-week program and is focused on doing 100 customer interviews, but also comes with $50,000 in funding to compensate for your time. You can jump straight to the national program if your research has received federal funding in the past. But again, I would highly recommend starting with the regional just because it's shorter, it's easier, it's a good way to get your foot in the door and then to learn things, and then going to the national after that. I talk to so many researchers who see this as, this sounds great, but I just have a lot going on. I cannot emphasize enough how important of a program this is for you to, 1, get started off in the right direction, but 2, also, some people do this program and learn that, hey, their invention's really neat, but there actually isn't a market need for it. Nobody's willing to pay for their invention. And that's such an important thing to discover early on. It's much, much better to learn that after a 2 or 3 week program than to spend 3 years researching your product and hoping that it's going to turn into something and realizing that there just isn't a market for it at the end of all that period of time. In addition to the iCore program, we also have an awesome state program set up here through TEDCO, which is the investment arm of the Maryland state government. And it's called the Maryland Innovation Institute. And there's 2 different types of funding that we'll talk about through MII. The first is the Technology Validation Grant. And it's $115,000 without any overhead of funding that is provided as a 9-month project to validate your technology or your invention. It can cover salaries, equipment, materials, outside consultants and experts. It can be used for a variety of things as you go, again, from this idea stage to actually validating, hey, is this a product? You can go to this quick link here, go.umd.edu/about-MII to learn more. But again, this is really just kind of starting to take your idea and figuring out what is the market, what is the commercial application of this. You do write a little bit of a commercialization plan as part of this process, but as opposed to I-Core, which is completely focused on listening and you just kind of talk about your project a little bit, this is a more traditional grant application process where you do explain what your product is. You have to make a good case for why you need to do more technology validation, but also what the potential is, and then you can receive this funding. It is a grant, so there's no repayment or anything associated with it. This is a 9-month project, and there are some deliverables that you submit at the end of that time. As part of the MIA program, you're also connected with a site miner who helps you to write the application and defends your application to the evaluators. We've got 4 different site miners, each with a different subject area expertise, and each of them have done many of these applications before, and so they're able to really hone that application and make sure that you're talking about the right things in order to receive the funding. In addition to I-Core and TEDCO MII, we also have entrepreneurs in residence. And so these are 3 former entrepreneurs, most of them have exited their companies, who are just willing to meet with anybody, really. These folks are available for people who are coming through the Ventures program, people who are alumni of the university, people who are undergraduate students of the university. Harry, Doug, and Laura are fantastic. They've each got awesome stories about their own startups and their own startup experiences. And you can go to go.umd.edu/EIR 2022. I guess we made that link a while ago, but you can still access it to get on their calendars and find times to meet. They make time available every week to meet with entrepreneurs and are good, again, just really good sounding boards for figuring out what next steps are to share your idea. And again, this is, you want to share your idea a little bit, but then also listen to them and get their advice and feedback on what they do. And they're not associated with any specific program. They're open and available to anybody. And then this workshop series is also a great part of the feasibility assessment. So we have workshops on things from market research. We'll be having a UMD librarian coming in at the end of the month and talking about what are the resources available through the UMD library. We have entrepreneurs come in and talk about their stories, but you can go to our YouTube channel and view all the past iterations of this workshop and really think about, hey, is this something that I want to do? Do I need to recruit teammates who have these skills? Where are the areas that I need to kind of build my skills in order to be successful in turning this innovation into something that is marketable? I mentioned James Fay as our first success story. Dr. Can Cow is another success story here. So she was an associate, or she still is an associate professor in the Department of Cell Biology and Molecular Genetics, and was one of the leading researchers in human aging. And in 2014, Dr. Cow's lab discovered that a common dye, methylene blue, has incredible anti-aging properties for human skin. She came to Ventures, disclosed the discovery, and we have applied for patent protection for this technology. And with that protection, Dr. Cow first applied for TEDCO's MIA program in 2015, and she got that $115,000 for technology validation. And so she was able to go and research more about how this discovery could be applied and actually commercialized into a product. It took a while. It was 9 months of that program. Things didn't progress necessarily quickly afterwards, but she continued meeting with one of our mentors, our EIRs, and they were able to connect her. So it was actually Harry was her EIR that was working with her, and he was able to connect her with Miss Jasmine L. who is an accomplished industry professional in the beauty industry. And whereas Dr. Cow was a researcher and her specialty was this scientific research and aging, Miss Cordy had this experience creating products and marketing products, and particularly combined with the fact that this was an anti-aging product, they were able to quickly come together and launch a startup called mBlue Labs. At that point in time, so this is about 3 years after the initial patent application, they're able to apply for the MII company formation, which I'm going to talk about next, and receive funding to launch a company, create products. They now manufacture products out of Texas and Pennsylvania. And just last month, they were listed as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's top 100 one of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's top 100 small businesses. Jasmine and Dr. Can Cow continue to work on this product. They continue to have revenue and sales of products, and it's continuing to grow. And I think, again, just an example of going from research to getting mentor to getting the right partner and using our resources along the way. A reminder that it does take time to go through each of these steps, but that can result in becoming a real product on the market. And if you have signed up for this, you'll receive our newsletter. We've actually got a special code in our next newsletter to celebrate the fact that they were named as one of these top 100 small businesses where you can get a discount on some of their items. So if you're into anti-aging cream, look into that. Okay, so I talked about the feasibility section. Now we're going to talk about startup formation. And the two resources I'm going to talk about here are just company formation and the company formation funding that's again available through MII. So the phase 1 grant is $115,000. It's a grant. It's available to anybody who wants to do additional research about the commercialization potential of a technology. The company formation award is phase 3. There used to be a phase 2. There is not anymore. It's a little confusing. We've got phase 1 and phase 3, but not phase 2. Don't worry about that. It's just called company formation. It's a $300,000 promissory note. So as opposed to a grant, this is a loan. There is a payback in interest. It's about 8% interest rate, but there are different terms associated with it. But it's $300,000 for starting a company. And so when you apply for this, you provide your commercialization plan. You provide, and you don't have to have done the phase 1. Most companies that get the phase 3 have done phase 1, but you don't have to have done phase 1, the technology validation. But you do need to present a good case of why you think your company is going to be successful commercializing this research. And again, it's a 9-month project. The $300,000 will be put to use to support the advancement of the technology. You set specific milestones that you report on at the end of that 9-month period. And the money is there to help you through company launch, customer acquisition, and gaining follow-on investment. So hopefully adding to that $300,000. The last 4 years, we've had a steadily increasing number of TEDCO applications. This covers both the technology validation and the company formation. But you can see our success rate has also improved, and we credit that to our site miners being able to work closely with our companies, but also the number of ideas that are funded has improved every year. And so last year we awarded $2.6 million in funding to ideas coming out of the university through MII. And so really this is just a great way to get early funding for your company. The example I wanted to share here, I think this one is so cool. It's called Hazel Analytics. It started into research into health inspection. So Dr. Ginger Jin, way back when she was at UCLA, before she even came to the University of Maryland, she did a fairly famous, she is an economist, did a research project on how behaviors changed when restaurants in LA posted their health department score. And, of course, that made a big impact on who was coming into the restaurants and customers and stuff like that. And so that led to further research. But as she was doing that research, realized that it was really hard to normalize health department scores across the different jurisdictions because every city and county and state has a different way of scoring. Some of them score on a scale of 1 to 100. Some of them do a letter grade scale. And so it was really hard to create a data set and compare these. And so moved to the point where she wanted to create a national data set, was connected with Dr. Ben Peterson here at UMD, who helped her to put together a way to normalize these ratings, and then created a database and applied for funding to create this database. I'm forgetting the foundation, but this was still all very much part of research. And as that funding was running out, they were looking, hey, we think this project is really good. We think there's a lot of value. We think there's a lot of organizations, particularly in the government, that might want to have a standardized way of measuring the health scores of different food selling services throughout the country. And so they recruited an MBA student to go through the I-Corps program. Well, first, actually, they did MII to get additional funding to the phase 1, the technology validation, but then recruited an MBA student to help go through the I-Corps program. And what that MBA student discovered was that rather than the government, the most interested customers were large corporations like Target or Starbucks that have different venues in all these different states and were receiving all these different health scores, but had no way of standardizing those grades and making sure that their company standards were being enforced across all these different locations. And so when he discovered that, they said, hey, there's a potential market for us here. There's people who are willing to pay for this product. And so then we're able to apply for that phase 3 grant and say, let's start a company. Let's look at these people as our initial customers. And so Hazel Analytics, all the funding they took, they didn't need to take any VC funding. They didn't need to do any external type of investment. They got $100,000 from that initial MII, and then they got $300,000 from the MII company formation. And that's all the funding that they needed to get this project off the ground. You can see all the companies that they worked with. Eventually, Yelp became a partner, and Yelp was using their algorithm and their database to incorporate health grades into the restaurants that it was providing its customers. And in 2023, they were acquired by Ecolab. But again, if we go back to talking about applying your research to a broader audience, right? There's obviously financial benefits to doing something like this. And Dr. Jin and Dr. Peterson both benefited from founding this company. But if you just think about like the product itself, right? This would have just been a research paper and then a database that was built and then was not maintained once the funding ran out. But by commercializing, by finding a market for it, they're able to put this out there, where it is now maintained by a company for which it is a core part of this company's business practice and is used by hundreds of businesses across the United States. And so commercialization really plays this important role in getting your research out into the real world, continuing to make an impact and changing the way that we do things. Once you go through the company formation process, the next step is startup acceleration. And we have a variety of opportunities for startup acceleration. We provide space. We have a couple accelerators here on campus. If not on campus, within the Discovery District, we help companies to find space there. We obviously, at this point in time, once you've founded a company, there's conflict of interest things that we want to consider. We help walk through that process. Again, if you started a company now, we have to figure out, hey, are you going to license that IP to a startup? Are you going to license it to external entities? We help with that process. There are other grants. MIPS is the Maryland Industrial Partnership. It's a way for industries. So if you start a company, you can put in some money and the state will match that money as you continue to do research in a lab here on campus. Or SBIR, which is a federal program, allows you to receive grant money from the federal government in exchange for promising to sell these products to the federal government once they come to market. And we again help with both those stages. IonQ is one of the companies I like to highlight here. I talked about how this is a game board, and it's, again, best to start at the beginning and go through the process, but really you can jump in anywhere. IonQ is a quantum computing company, and just out of the research that they were doing, they were already getting a ton of interest from venture capital and funders, and so they were able to skip the ICOR process. They already knew that there were customers available. They were able to skip the MII phase 3 grants because they didn't need that funding. They already had people promising a lot more funding. And so they just came to us for the IP protection, but then also worked with us to find headquarters in a place, since they're based right here in the Discovery District, just down the road from the campus, and work closely with us. And they had an IPO of $2 billion just a couple of years ago. And so I would say, they're a huge success and one of the leading ion computing companies out there. Again, this is just a real high-level overview of kind of the track that we've put people through. Some pieces of advice that we like to give everybody is don't form the startup too early. Lots of people just want to jump in and form the company. We encourage you, first, do the ICOR process, right? Do the feasibility assessment, figure out, hey, is this marketable? Professors can be founders and co-founders, but you shouldn't plan on becoming CEOs. And this is something we're thinking about for the graduate and postdoc students who are attending this as well, right? Becoming a CEO for, again, graduate and postdoc students may make sense, but it may not be what you want to do. You may want to remain in academia. And there's a way to remain involved in a startup without being the CEO of a startup. We especially discourage professors from becoming CEOs, because if you do, there will come a time where you will have to choose one or the other. And that can be a difficult decision, could take you away from what you enjoy doing as a researcher or as a faculty member. Also, it's startups are inherently high risk. It depends on your risk tolerance and risk level. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide, but we do encourage you to find a team, build a team that has different strengths and different backgrounds that can come together to help the startup get off the ground. And yeah, we really, really just encourage early market validation, right? It's really great to have assumptions about what your product is, and we know all the researchers we work with are brilliant and know a ton about their specific field, but it's a different thing to figure out how their specific field applies to the market. And so we really encourage taking the time to learn about your market and to be able to test your assumptions and to go forward based on the data you receive off of those tests, as opposed to just going forward based on your assumptions. I mentioned real briefly about being founders and co-founders and not CEOs. Our most successful founders here at the University of Maryland have figured this out. And it took them a while. At first, they wanted to be the CEO too. And kind of what we see happen when a researcher wants to be the CEO is they do the patent protection, they then don't have time for a lot of the other things. And so maybe it takes them a while to go through I-Corps. If they ever make it through I-Corps, maybe they apply for the MII grant and they get phase 1 done. But like we saw with Dr. Cow earlier in this slideshow, right? You got the phase 1 done, you have a lot of really interesting stuff from your research, but you're not quite sure what the next steps are. And she didn't really take off until she was paired with the CEO that could actually help her figure out the next steps in starting a business. Dr. Hugh and Dr. Srini Raghavan both have figured this out, and both have multiple startups because of it. Whenever they have research that they think has commercialization potential, they'll disclose, they'll find a postdoc or PhD or master's student who they think is really qualified and interested in the product, and they'll have that student lead the process through these various programs. And then, if it turns out that the idea doesn't work, they can shut it down really easily. If it turns out the idea works, they remain involved as an advisor. I think of Inventwood right here, which just opened its first manufacturing facilities in Frederick. And I think they're a great example because they had a CEO Josh, who was their initial CEO, and he has just taken a different position in the company as they've brought in somebody who has even more experience, right? And companies grow and you have different leaders working through different stages of the growth process, and just realize, the team that you start off with is important, but it's not going to be the team that you end with. And so figure out what your role is, what your best contribution is, where you lie with that, and who else you need to bring in to help your team. Same with Dr. Srini, just the different startups that he's been able to create. He's relied a lot on being able to pass off the work to postdocs who really take the lead, have the energy to do that, and allow these researchers to continue doing research, but also continue to consulting to advise these companies. So to wrap up, I encourage you to review the startup guide.umd.edu, particularly if you're working with university IP. If you're not working with university IP, the I-Corps program is still open and available to you. The MII programs, again, are reserved for people working with university IP, but other things like space on campus, the Dingman Center is a great resource if you don't have university IP, but review the startup guide and kind of look over what the steps are and what's available. Apply for the next regional I-Corps. You can do that at icorps.umd.edu. Like I said, even without participating in the cohort itself, you can go on, apply, and get access to all their resources and information, which are posted online. You can sign up for an EIR, an entrepreneur in residence, regardless of whether what your association with the university is. They're there to meet with you and are open to that. Our workshop series is open to everyone. Submit an IP disclosure if you're working with university IP. And then once you've done that, we're happy to help you apply for TEDCO MII funding. But that's all I've got for today. We've got the rest of our time here open for answering questions, for talking. If you've got some more specific details you want to go over with your project, I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Looks like I've got questions coming in now, but just wanted to thank you all for your participation. Like I said, I'll be here and I'll be chatting with folks about their questions, but feel free if you've got other commitments to hop off, and I'll post these all online. I am going to stop the recording now so I can answer these questions. Give me 1 second.